Hey, my name's John, and I hope you're doing well today. And today I want to talk about ownership and what that really means. A few days ago, I had the chance to catch up with an old friend of mine that went to the same university that I did, and we were just chatting and reminiscing about our old times there. We actually not only studied at the same university, but for the same program too. So it was pretty nice to catch up and see what he's been up to for these past few years. Talking about our lives, where we've worked so far, and what our plans are for the future. The same stuff you talk to any friend you haven't seen quite a while about. And there was one moment where he was talking about a coworker that he had in the past, where someone that he had worked with in the past had a hard time pushing through work such that whenever he got stuck, he had a really bad habit of waiting until someone else came to help him instead. Mind you, we were talking about how this type of stuff isn't exactly uncommon, especially for people that had just started working, and I think that's a part of everyone's career of growing out of this eventually. And this brought me back to our fourth year together, where we had a project together when we were supposed to work in groups of 6 to 8 and try to contribute to some open source project on GitHub. I worked with him, some random classmates, and a few friends that I had gotten to know from my time interning just a few months ago. For the most part, things went smoothly. People were on time, we planned out everything, and had an idea for what we were going to submit. For the last part of the project, we were supposed to submit a report just going through and really summarizing what our processes were. Stuff such as how important the feature was we were submitting, how we designed a solution, how we tested it, and etc, etc, etc. You get the idea. So we split the work based on who wanted to take what section. For the part about testing, we all agreed that my old friend from my first internship days was going to be the person in charge of that. And while things were going smoothly, with pretty regular meetings about how far along we were, he had always told us every time that he was just working on it and that he would get it done, to not worry about it, and that he didn't really need any help. And really, to nobody's surprise in hindsight, when we were trying to put everything together towards the last few days, he had told us that he wasn't going to be able to finish it, and that he was sorry for everything that had happened. Right after hearing this, we were just focused on trying to finish the report. We did our best together to rush through the testing part. And we had a pretty good laugh about it almost 7 years later. I still remember the two of us being pretty frustrated at him at the time for doing something like this. But it wasn't just that he didn't finish his part of the report, it was also because of the way he acted. I remember trying to quickly call him on Discord and his cell phone pretty frantically that night because he had missed a meeting towards the end of the semester where we were supposed to try to put everything together. That's when he finally confessed to us that he didn't do it. I asked him if he could go home and give us at least some of his notes to help us put it together, but he was out playing instead and that he just couldn't make it. We rushed together to get something submitted at the end, and I got an apology from him about what had happened afterwards. But by then, it was little too late, and I really had lost all trust that I had in this guy. I came home afterwards thinking about all of this and how he didn't really take ownership for what had happened. Yes, it wasn't done on time, but I felt like if he had taken ownership for all this, he would have at least suggested to us, and we could have worked together to get something done. With his notes that he had, instead of him just really giving up and taking no responsibility for what had happened. And I think this goes into the idea of what taking ownership is and why it's so important. To me, I think taking ownership in something is not only about accepting responsibility for getting something done, but also how proactive you are when it comes down to solving problems. You're focused on the overall goal and really what it takes to get there. Planning, designing, managing timelines, and making sure the implementation goes smoothly. Although this is a bit biased from the software development industry, a good example I had was the first few months of a job I was working at. I had accidentally deployed something to production before our launch that had caused some of our users to get locked out of a system temporarily. I had to quickly make a decision about doing an immediate rollback to unblock some people from, just working. And this is because it was the first time we had to do any type of rollback related to this problem, so it was new for everybody in the team. I decided to do a deep dive into how our system worked and wrote a small report of what had happened a few days later. Why it had happened, how we can solve it, and more importantly, how to make sure this doesn't happen again. The details aren't significant, but what is important is that I was trying to push forward a solution and actively trying to design something that was aimed at preventing this from happening again in the future. There's always going to be some amount of human error doing this, so I wanted to limit the chance of that happening, even if it was just by a little. And a few days later, after we had gotten everything sorted out in the short term, I really understood from this experience what it really means to take ownership and how it's less about being able to complete everything by yourself, but rather being more focused on engagement and trying to actively push for a solution rather than passively waiting for something to happen. And I think it's something that is helpful for anyone that wants to do good work. It's not about overworking or focusing on every little detail, but just being able to be active in solving what the current problems are. You've probably worked with people like this in the past, and the ones that are the opposite, especially if you're a manager, you would, from my guess, relate to this feeling the most. So it's something that I want people to be aware of and to finally try to at least understand for what taking ownership actually means. So, have you ever taken ownership of any project you've worked with in the past, be it for school or for work? And what does taking ownership mean to you, and how would you describe it? Whatever your definition is, I do hope you have a chance to think about it and whether it's beneficial or not. So, as always, thanks for watching. Until next time.